There are still men in women's prisons. It's absolutely wrong. It's illegal. It needs sorting.
So do you think that what you would call a trans woman, if they've committed a crime, that they should always by default go to a women's prison?
If they identify as a woman, then yes, they should.
It's a cruel and unusual punishment to lock women up with men.
Oh, here's someone blocking my camera.
Next is no personal detail.
So where do non-binary people go in prison?
I don't know.
No males in female jails!
Males in female jails!
No males in female jails!
Males in female jails!
That's the sound of trans joy.
Get them out now. That is where we're at.
Morning, I am here in Leeds because today there's going to be a protest outside the Ministry of Justice by a group of women because they are still putting men in women's prisons. So these women are basically saying, what the hell, why are these men still in women's prisons, especially after the Supreme Court ruling back in April that says that a man can never be a woman and that women have the right to single-sex spaces. There's also going to be a counter-protest by so-called trans activists, so that gives us an answer to the question, what are trans rights all about? In this case, it's about putting men in women's prisons, even violent ones. So, let's go and have a look. But first, how did we even get to a place where they thought it was a good idea to put men in women's prisons? In 1777, prison reformer John Howard highlighted the issue of men and women being housed together. In 1791, Sir George Paul opened a revolutionary new purpose-built prison that had separate sections for men and women. In the early 19th century, Elizabeth Fry became a driving force for prison reform, especially focusing on female inmates and keeping them safe from rape and sexual exploitation. Many of her ideas influenced the 1823 Jails Act that stated that the male and female prisoners shall be confined in separate wards or parts of the jail. This is echoed by the 1999 prison rules, as well as the United Nations Nelson Mandela rules from 2015. And of course, we have the Equality Act 2010 explicitly protecting single-sex spaces. Despite all this, since at least the early 80s, men have been placed in women's prisons, some of them sex offenders, murderers, and men with severe personality disorders. Why? Because trans! And over the years, the rules have been loosened up so much that all that seems to matter at this point is saying, I am a lady. Although there has been a slight reset since the Adam Graham / Isla Bryson scandal. But still, today, there are men in women's prisons, and that's why these women are protesting.
We're here to get men out of women's prisons, regardless of their crime or anything else, or whether they're cockless men. Cockless men are still men.
Cockless men are men.
They've got a GRC, they're still men.
Right, on the train I thought I should take that song by The Doors, Riders on the Storm.
Riders on the Storm.
Trans women are men. Trans women are men. Every single one of them
Yes!
will always be a man.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Right, so this is where we are, outside the Ministry of Justice offices. Women are getting ready to speak, and there is no TRA inside. We do have police here. There's a couple of them walking around, trying to keep us safe. But we may be all right. Maybe they're still in bed. It's too early. What brings you here today?
Well, obviously, something really needs to be done. The situation's gone on far too long, and especially after the SC ruling, way back now. There are still men in women's prisons. It's absolutely wrong. It's illegal. It needs sorting.
And there's such vulnerable women in prisons, and I really don't understand why particularly the Ministry of Justice can't actually acknowledge the impact of the Supreme Court ruling and just quietly move them out and stop putting women at risk. Women can't go anywhere when they're surrounded by sex offenders, by male violent offenders, and it's appalling that the people in charge think this is okay. I would have hoped that the Ministry of Justice would have seen the Supreme Court judgment and felt the strength of that and used that judgment to justify moving all men out of women's prisons. You know, they have legal backing, a legal rationale to do that. And I'm just not sure why that isn't happening.
They've always had a legal rationale to do that, and they've never used it. For some reason, they've decided that women should be the bodyguards for what they call vulnerable men. It's the women who are vulnerable. Most women who are in prison have been, they are the most vulnerable. They've often been subject to male violence. They're usually in for something trivial, like non-payment of the bloody TV licence. You know, it's crazy. You know, we're not human shields for men.
Look at all these signs. Well, these signs couldn't be any clearer. Oh, here's a good one. Good morning. Can you tell me about your banner?
Yeah, so it says women want our stuff back, and there's a lot to get back. And we would hope with the Supreme Court judgment that we get lots of it back, all our single-sex spaces, services and facilities. Elizabeth Fry would be very upset, who campaigned to get women on their own prisons. And I think it's a lack of understanding that if a man says he's a woman, then all of a sudden he becomes less of a man. It's just a really sexist concept. And that they're safe in women's prisons just because they say they're a woman. Whether they've got a penis, testicles or not, they're still men.
Women deserve the right to have a single sex space in prison without men identifying as women. I think that's really important for their safety.
This is the dress that was made by our lovely colleague, and which inspired the t-shirts, and we've made some bags, and it's on our logo for the prison protest that we've been doing for the last 12 months.
Right, so this isn't just a one-off, this is part of like a whole programme.
Yes. We started about this time last year organising. Our first protest was the MOJ in London in March this year, but from October to March we visited every prison in the female estate in the whole country with the Mother banner, which is the big blue banner that says no men in women's prisons. That went to every prison, and we created a video that went out just before March, and then we've done different protests at different prisons all around the country. Different women have been out everywhere, and we've been doing street turfing, talking to the community and informing them of the issues of men in women's prisons.
And what has the response been so far from the public?
The response has just been positive all the way around the country. Even this morning, having a coffee in Cafe Nero around the corner, a man just came up to us and said, I'm not staying, I don't know anything about this, but I've just been listening to you speak, I've been on Google, I've been on Twitter, seeing what you're doing, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. Well done and good luck today.
Yeah, when we've been street turfing, everyone knows. Now, everyone knows what the issue is. No one's in the dark anymore. We hand out leaflets and they go, oh yes, I know, I understand this. And that's been a big difference. Since the Supreme Court ruling, so many more people now know the issue and starting to understand, and they know it's not trans, they know it's men. And that's been a really, really positive.
Yeah, because that's the thing that the word trans does. It just completely obfuscates that we're talking about a type of men, a subclass of men. Just using the word trans removes women's rights, just the word itself.
Clear language, just nice clear language and describing the reality that women are facing.
We had no pushback at all in the street turfing. We were in Leeds last weekend and we didn't get anyone who disagreed with us. Everyone was really positive. Lots of people said they were coming down. So yeah, it's been a real. It's really lifted our spirits, talking to the public and realising that they actually do agree with us and want men out of women's prisons as well.
Now behind us, or behind you, there are some people gathering to protest you. So you're saying no men in women's prisons. They're saying yes, men absolutely need to be in women's prisons. How does it make you feel to have them just like, we tend to ask, trans rights, what do trans rights mean? And here we have it, like they're literally saying put the men in women's prisons.
They have a very strange view of it. They seem to see it as some sort of apartheid. So I know people have come back from university with textbooks saying the prison system and the apartheid of sex. So they're kind of being indoctrinated into believing that it's some sort of oppression to keep men and women separate in prisons, when it's been part of the Jails Act since for hundreds of years.
1823.
Thank you very much. And it's against the Geneva Convention to put men and women locked up together. So yeah, it's very difficult to understand their position, especially when a lot of the men that are in women's prison, or some of the men that are in women's prisons, are there and they're in prison for violent offences and sexual offences. So it's very hard to understand their position, if not impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible.
The only way I see it is that it's a cruel and unusual punishment to lock women up with men.
Yeah,
it's
women don't matter. I think that's basically what I get from trans rights activists. It's just that women don't matter. What do men want? And they're being backed up by the unions and some Labour and Lib Dem and Green politicians. I'm actually looking at the moment at how the new Prevent guidelines that have come out to dictate what terrorism is, and what we're seeing now actually falls under those guidelines of terrorism.
What they are doing.
Yeah, in terms of, the Supreme Court, there's no higher court in the land, and the Supreme Court have ruled unequivocally that under no circumstances is a man allowed to be legally classed as a woman, even with the GRC. And so they are actively seeking to undermine the Supreme Court, which is one of the three pillars of democracy. And the Parliament is another one, and they are breaking the law. So our next, if I'm allowed to say, if they don't get men out of women's prisons ASAP, we're going to bring a court case against the government to force them to do it, because they are actively breaking the law at the moment.
Now they've been breaking the law for decades,
yes.
Ever since they started putting men in women's prisons. Is there any kind of apology that you want from the Ministry of Justice, or even some kind of compensation for the women that have had to put up with these men?
Well, I would say first of all I want action. Yeah. So the important thing is to get men out of the prisons. In terms of women that have been harmed through this policy, which we know there are, I do believe those women should have some recompense, and just have that recognised that the harms have been committed. But apologies it doesn't mean anything if there's no action. So that's what we want.
Yeah, it's get men out. Yeah. Get them out, them out now. Yeah. That is where we're at. It's against the law. We've now had, I think someone's got a sign, 73 days since the Supreme Court judgment. Get it 73 days, get them out now.
Okay, it does look like the TRAs have shown up. So it's a small group, and they're here to basically say that men should absolutely be in women's prisons. So let's see if any of them wants to have a chat with me. This young woman waved at me while she saw me walking around filming, so I thought, okay, I'll go up and ask her about her sign. But then she didn't want to talk on camera, and she said that, the camera was really triggering to her. We did have a chat off camera, and it was all the usual, She talked about, we need nuance, what about intersex, blah, blah, blah. One thing that she did admit, though, and I thought that was interesting, is she said she thought that their side had to change tack and that they'd been too aggressive, because she saw the police presence and she said there shouldn't be a need for the police. And I'm like, I agree with you. And, that's because your side is always being so aggressive. So that didn't really go anywhere, and then she ended with, I hope you listen to our speakers. It's like, why is it always us that has to listen? Why don't they listen to us? Anyways, then I found someone who did want to speak on camera. So, good morning. Good morning. Tell me about why you're here today.
We're here to basically stand up for what is the right, is the truth. Trans people are real and they deserve rights as much as anybody.
What particular rights are we talking about here today?
We're talking about the rights of trans women to be classed as women and to be dealt with that in all walks of life, however that comes across.
How did you feel about the Supreme Court judgment when they said, basically, for the purpose of the Equality Act, it's about biological sex, and even the ones with a gender recognition certificate are legally male?
I think it's ridiculous and uneducated, to be honest. It is so much more complex than that, especially if you look at the existence of intersex individuals and non-binary individuals. The whole thing is not that simple. The whole world has never been that binary, and we should never look at it as such.
So do you think that what you would call a trans woman, if they've committed a crime, that they should always by default go to a women's prison?
If they identify as a woman, then yes, they should. They should.
What about the ones who only identify as a woman when they're in prison? We've seen that happening in the last couple of years. How do you know that it's like true?
Well, the whole thing is a lot more complex than that. There might be several reasons why in their everyday life they don't feel like they're in an environment to be able to identify as a woman. They might not be around supportive people. Maybe, even though it's a bad situation for them to be in, that is the one situation where they feel like they can actually talk about it. Obviously, there is so much complexities in it. It's not simple, but it should not be these people go here and these people go here, no matter what anybody says and how everybody identifies. You know, people are just people, and we should listen to them about how they feel in themselves and not just put people in these boxes.
And I see you've got both the non-binary badge and the trans badge. Do you identify that way yourself?
Yeah, I'm non-binary. Yeah, I do.
When did that's realization kick in?
Probably my whole life. I mean, I came out when I was about 20, but that was because before then I didn't realise that it was really something that was an option to me. People find it hard to understand, and what I would say to that is that before I knew it was something that I was feeling, I found it hard to understand as well. But if it's something that makes somebody happy, then what is the problem with it? You know, expressing myself like this and being non-binary is something that has made me infinitely more happier and confident in myself than I was beforehand. And
that's really interesting to me. So how did it sort of free you up?
Just in the way that I'm expressing myself, in the way that people that refer to me and talk to me, you know, if I am seen as the person that I feel like I am, it makes me feel just so much better about myself and feels respected and, you know, happy. I'm sure that you feel the same if people are talking to you in the way that you want the world to see you. It makes you feel better about yourself as well, no matter whether that's about gender identity or anything. It's just the image that we are putting out to the world.
What sort of pressures did you feel to be a certain way before you came out as non-binary?
Well, I think that society has always been very black and white. You know, you've got to be in one box or other. And I don't know, I think that everybody kind of feels a bit of pressure to that. Even cis people who identify as, you know, how they were born, there's societal expectations like toxic masculinity forcing men to feel like they need to be a certain way. It doesn't just apply to trans people, it applies to everybody. And, you know, stepping out of that is something that would be beneficial to everybody, not just trans people.
So did you feel a pressure to be feminine?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, and it's not just about how I present with what I wear and things, it's just everything about who I feel like I am inside, you know.
So where do non-binary people go in prison?
I don't know. I'm not the one to answer that question. haven't made the prison system. I don't think anything should be as binary as it is. I don't have the answers to these. But the answer isn't to just put people in boxes regardless of how they identify. The whole thing is more complex and cannot just be solved by people deciding that trans women are not women.
Do you think there should be a non-binary wing?
I have no idea. Maybe there should be. You know, I don't have the answers to this, but I think bigotry is never the answer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just as we stopped filming, she said the most interesting thing. So I asked her whether she still acknowledged that she's female. That's actually when the friend with the red hair spoke for the first time. And she's like, well, yeah, that's like day-to-day reality. And then the young woman I'd been talking to said, yeah, I'm not in denial about that, almost in a duh kind of way. But then she said, but it really hurts when people think I'm a girl. Well, here they are with their theme song, of course. Men, I feel like a woman. I don't think they realize the irony of it.
Man,
I feel like a woman. And of course, they've started the music as the women are doing their speeches.
We demand no men in women's prison. All of us inspired by the wonderful work of Takeover and keep prison single sex.
Right, so these women are doing their speeches about keeping prisons, women's prisons, free of men. And then here we have this crowd being loud.
Mic check. If police talk to you, no matter the question, protect yourself, protect other people, say no comment. The police officers in blue tabbards are also police officers. Their job is to gain information about protesters. Say no comment. Next is under what power? If police tell you to do something, check they're acting lawfully. Ask under what power.
Oh, here's someone blocking my camera.
Next is no personal detail.
That's okay, I'll hold it up higher.
Stop and search, don't give police personal details. This includes your visa status.
So this is the usual thing that they do. Up quick, and I've got the sign.
If you get arrested, ask for a solicitor on the bus pass. Do not accept the duty solicitor. Say no duty solicitor.
So this is what we see at different protests that happened in Manchester the other day, because they don't want you to see anything. They don't want you to see their signs. We could be yelling at billionaires, is what that sign says. So I've got the sign. Thank you.
On the bus card, if you want, you should write that number on your arm.
Fight prison, not prisoners. I don't know what that means. Does that mean not having prisons? Now the song goes, she's a lady, so I do feel kind of tempted to say, that's a man, he's a bloke, he's not a lady, but I'll behave.
A short speech and a poem from our good friend Dalton Harrison, who was a transgender man incarcerated in a female prison.
Okay, so this woman was in prison from about 2018 to 2019, served a sentence of about a year. I don't know what she was in for, but it's pretty obvious why they put her in a women's prison and not in the men's.
He now does work with Bent Bars Collective and runs poetry workshops where he talks about his time as an incarcerated man in a women's prison.
Okay, so there's a protest against men in women's prisons, and they decide to counter-protest and talk about a woman in a woman's prison. Like, what? Why didn't they talk about the lovely Ina Bryson or Karen White?
Sadly, he can't be with us today, but we've got a statement and a poem to read out on his behalf.
Her poetry is absolutely riveting and includes such lines as, I am a man and I exist. Right, back to the women.
So there are 4 women's prisons in the south. As you'll hear a lot today, since the ruling which states clearly that single-sex services should only include people of that sex, not those who claim to be. This isn't a new law, it is the way the law should always have been interpreted and implemented. A service like prisons clearly needs to be single-sex. They should be moved out immediately.
Unfortunately, that megaphone was no match for the sound system that the TRAs were using, so it was really hard to hear the speeches, and I decided to go back to the other side.
But instead brandishes their struggle as an excuse to target another vulnerable minority who suffer at the hands of misogyny, patriarchy, violent carceral systems and femicide that prop up the state. Yesterday, I spent the evening with my good friend Sarah Jane Baker, who is the longest serving trans prisoner in the UK.
He's talking about this man who served about 30 years in prison for kidnap, torture and attempted murder, cut off his own balls and, according to himself, ate part of them. He also called for violence against women at Trans Pride in 2023 in London.
If you see a turf, punch him in the fucking face! She was initially planning on being here today, and she sends her love and solidarity to everyone here.
They were just applauding a kidnapper and torturer.
Denied access to medical treatment.
Can you believe that?
She was forced to commit her own DIY vasectomy. And I'll say it again, radical feminists seek the liberation for all women. And we must not rest until all women are free. It's one struggle, one fight, trans rights and women's rights. One struggle, one fight. Trans rights and women's rights. One struggle, one fight. Trans rights and women's rights.
Okay, now we're getting It's Raining Men. Yeah, tell us about it. It's raining men in the women's prisons. It's raining men in the rape shelters. It's raining men in the women's toilets. It's raining men everywhere. Here's a speech by Tish. It's got some real good stuff in it, but the TRAs were making so much noise that the sound isn't too great. I've done some sound editing and also added subtitles, so I hope that you can still follow it all.
My son is a gay boy, he's not a woman. And unfortunately, he's gone down the trans path and he's medicalising. And he's lovely, and he is a refugee from masculinity, but it's not women's job to run the refugee camp. So I would be terrified if he was in prison. But the correct place for him to be would be a male prison in a vulnerable person's unit, and that's where they all should be. Now I just want to talk about two men. One man is now based in Leeds, and his name's Mark Jones, but he's gone by Karen Jones and also Karen Lawson. Now, his story is that he was living with a man, I think he was called Mark Carter, and apparently they had a dispute. He was only 18, and he killed that man because he wouldn't pay for his transition-related surgery, whatever that means, makeup, fake tits, whatever. And he left that body for 3 weeks so that when he was finally found, they couldn't determine the cause of death, but it was Jones who did it. And he was sent to prison for that. But he was out in a remarkably short time, which seems to be the story with these men. So 5 days after he was released on licence, now calling himself Karen Lawson, I think he was still Lawson then, he went into a shop for transvestites. And whilst he was in that shop, he dragged a shop assistant into the back, rammed a lemon in her mouth, punched her in the face, and tried to rape her. And the only reason that he's not counted as rape was because by that time he was taking estrogen, which has a negative impact on sexual function, and he wasn't able to sustain an erection. Now, subsequent to that, he was recalled to prison, but he was still in a male prison. So he then took a case, I think it went to the European Court of Human Rights, to maintain that he should be moved to a female prison. And how he got that was because he wanted gender reassignment surgery. And under the rules for the gender clinics, he had to live as a woman for 2 years, whatever that means. So he took the case on the grounds that he couldn't live as a woman in the male estate. They let him have his own room, they let him have makeup, they let him have different clothing, but that wasn't enough. So the men who took the case for him, they made the case that he needed to be with his peers. That is, using women as a therapeutic aid for a man who'd committed a serious sexual assault on the woman. Now, the man who was talking about his sexual assault mitigated by saying, well, he didn't actually manage to penetrate her, and he really was more motivated by jealousy than sexual desire. What the woman actually said was, I thought I was going to die. So he won that case, and he was moved to the female prison, but one of the people who helped him get there was James Barrett. Now, James Barrett was asked, what about the women who object? What he actually said was, there'll always be that sort of woman who likes conflict. So he was moved. Now, James Barrett went on, he appears in a lot of these legal cases, but he went on to be the head of the British Association of Gender Identity Professionals. And even he got a little bit of cop on, because when they were moving men through self-ID into the female estate, he actually wrote a letter on behalf of BAGID, or whatever it's called, and said it would be naive to assume that no man will use such a loophole for nefarious purposes. So he can have kudos for that, but it doesn't overrule all the other harms he's done. So the next case, now I should mention Karen Jones is based in Leeds, and I'm reliably informed that he goes around trying to get access to female self-defence classes. He also goes into prisons and advises them on LGBTQIAP, and he was also invited to the House of Lords by Lord Patel to advise on transgender prisoners. This is a man who had committed manslaughter and a serious sexual offence against women, advising Lord Patel. Now, secondly, I want to talk about a man called Megan Key. Now, Megan Key is a trans-identified male. He was invited to the laughable Women's and Equality Committee in Parliament. And on that panel was Jess Phillips. And what Megan Key said was that being a sex offender is no bar to going in the female estate. And Jess Phillips, who had the perfect opportunity to contradict him, said absolutely nothing. And that was chaired by Maria Miller. So Jess Phillips, I'm afraid, she speaks out both sides of her mouth and she cannot be trusted. Megan Key as well, a probation officer from London, got in touch with me and directed me to listen to a podcast. And it was a podcast run by, the feminists, inverted commas, who call themselves intersexual. And in that podcast he talked about his multiple sexual partners, how he loved violent sex as a woman, blah blah, and yet that man is advising government bodies on male sex offenders, putting them in the female estate. That's done for me, thank you. No men in women's prison.
Please welcome Belle Staffy. Less than a mile away from here, there is Leeds Prison, which is a men's prison. I worked there 25 years ago. 25 years ago, they housed transsexual men and autogynephiles, transvestites. They were on the vulnerable prisoner unit, so they were well looked after. They weren't, in the 1990s, they weren't allowed to wear feminine clothes. They had to wear prison uniform, which was a sweatshirt, jeans and shoes, slip-on shoes. They were protected. They couldn't go on normal location because of not so much their transgender status, it was because of the horrific crimes they had committed against usually partners. They're degenerate men, right? And the only reason they are getting into women's prisons is because they're grooming the MOJ. The MOJ are really woke, right on, and they have been groomed. No man needs to be in a women's prison, ever. They are well... 25 years ago, I was on wings with these men, and they fitted in. Shabana Mahmood, as soon as the government changed, started to sign off on men being put back into women's prisons. So we've got Shabana Mahmood from the disgusting, dreadful, degenerate Labour Party doing this. Kate Coleman Coleman stopped this with the Tories. Kate Coleman managed to stop them going in. How many of them are in the prison? No one knows. And do you know why no one knows? Because they've all got a GRC. But I'll tell you now, you stand on the floors on a prison wing, but you look down, you can spot every fucking one of them. Huge, great big bricks. So what I'm wanting them to do some loud angry chants at this, because we're stood here all calm and cool, but this makes my piss boil. Okay? I'm going to say some, like, Shabana Mahmood, get them out, and we'll do that a few times. Is that alright? But with feeling, right? Shabana Mahmood, get them out! Shabana Mahmood! Shabana Mahmood! Shabana Mahmood! Brilliant, thank you. Right, and then we'll do the easy one, which we all know, which is no males in female jails. No males in female jails. No males in female jails. Thank you very, very much for your coming. Thank you very, very, very much.
Police is now stopping me from going over to their side. So I'll appreciate the wonderful vocal talents from a distance. That's the sound of trans joy. The lyrics are "Maybe they'll die." Lovely stuff. This is the Be Kind, the anthem of the Be Kind Brigade. Now compare that with the singing over here.
Sisterhood, our sex won't be denied. More dignity, reality, we are standing side by side. For women's rights are human rights, we won't let you forget. For women's rights are human rights, this isn't over yet.
Okay, that's the end of the event, so we're off to the pub. The police are holding the line, and I guess they're letting us leave in peace, which is good. It's raining men in women's prisons, it's raining men in the women's toilets, it's raining men in the women's rape shelters, it's raining men. Everywhere where there's a woman sign, basically.
Cheers guys, thank you.
Thank you. How was the day for you?
Am I holding this, man, or not? No. Really good, positive energy, brilliant turnout of everybody today, yes.
How do you feel about having people protesting the fact that you want to keep women's prisons women only?
Well, I think it's brilliant optics that they've decided to come out today on a Saturday to shout and scream and drown out women that want to say that there should be no men in women's prisons. I think they're probably sick of the Free Palestine one and decided to come here for a change today, is what I reckon. It's the same people as far as I can tell.
Now the police were quite good. They kept the two different sides apart.
Yeah, brilliant. In fact, compared to, I've been to quite a few Let Women Speak events where I feel that the police have not done a very good job, where they haven't kept the counter-protesters far enough away. Maybe they have learned from their experience of all of those. And to be fair to them, they were really good at the Let Women Speak in Leeds, so I can't really say that they're always bad. But yeah, I think they did really well keeping us away. I just wish they wouldn't let them have the loud music to drown us out, because yes, they've got the right to protest, but I don't think they've got the right to drown us out for what they're saying.
It's very different saying, okay, you have your say, we have ours. No, they want to drown you out.
Yeah, they just want to it's just silence. It's just another way to silence women, isn't it? All right.
What are you taking away from this day?
I've met some new friends, new turfs that I haven't came across yet, and I'm looking forward to going to the pub for a pint.
So, time to go back to London. Overall, it was a pretty good day, and the women got to speak and have their say. There's going to be another event, I think in Birmingham, coming up in July, to mark that it's 101 days since the Supreme Court ruling and why are there still men in women's prisons. So, all good. It wasn't too crazy today. I mean, you know, you had the guy trying to obscure me and my camera with the flag. It's the usual. But the police were good. They were quite firm, actually, because they wouldn't even allow me to cross the line after a while. I think the contrast was very interesting, especially at the end between the song that what they were singing, or whoever it was that was singing. It was aggressive, it was growly, and there was a lyric in there about they may die, or I hope they will die, about us. Whereas then on our side, women were singing about for women's rights are human rights, and it wasn't just like the quality of the singing that was very different, but the energy and the meaning and the message. So I think that sums it up. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and I shall see you in the next one. Ciao. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my PayPal and Patreon supporters. Because of you, I can make videos like this. Special shout out to my big spenders. Help Her Open, Mama Turf and the Turventines, me Julie, the lovely Mary, Julia, Dusty, Judels, Leffy, Dorothy, Wildfire, Esther, and Martha. Thank you.
Trans women are men. Trans women are men. Every single one of them
Yes!
will always be a man.
Brilliant.